Last year, a young lady, Ella, was changing using a girl's bathroom when a male person entered the space. She was alarmed and initially did not even tell her parents. What would you do? Ella eventually decided to tell her parents. She talked it over also with her peers. The bathroom and locker rooms were no longer a safe place for girls to go to. Speaking to the school board did not seem to help change things. As you know, here in Menomonie, I've been concerned for some time about the SDMA gender policy plan, which allows, even encourages males who have gender dysphoria to enter girls-only spaces. This policy has not yet changed. As a school board, you are responsible for the oversight of the education and safety of our precious children and young people. You work hard to give the educators the tools and support they need to teach with patience, kindness, encouragement, and truth. A sound educator needs courage and strength to teach academic excellence and character. A sound and moral education instructs not only the mind, but also the heart. Aristotle said, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. Our LGBTQ gender dysphoric friends are trying to tell us that they want an education built on their heart feelings, and they want us all to get on board with them no matter how wrong or how dangerous this philosophy is. No matter if running with this philosophy puts young girls in danger. These dysphoric students need an education of the heart. The girls simply need a safe place to go. Teachers and overseers must have the courage to teach the mind as well as the heart of LGBTQ gender dysphoric students. The SDMA needs a policy that legally protects the safe places of young female students. The SDMA prides itself in being an upstanding educational school district. The gender policy plan is failing our community when it does not educate the mind and it puts young female students at risk. Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. I would advise the school board to take a lesson from the New Richmond School District. Get your policy revised before something bad happens. Thank you.
Right. And our second speaker tonight is Lori Green.
Hi, I am here this afternoon to speak of the safety of the high school parking lot entrances. If you're going south on Fifth Street West and you're coming up the hill, that's an in and out entrance right there. However, there have been multiple times I have been hit from my wheelchair, coming up between cars, and students flying up. These young drivers don't slow down enough. They don't pay attention, and they just blast through. I would like to bring the suggestion up that entrance at the top of the hill be entrance only. The one coming out in the middle of the yard be exit only. Not just for my safety, but for other people that live in that area. There are a lot of disabled, a lot of elderly, and a lot of young families that are in that area. Me personally, I will not leave my home between 3 and 4 because I am afraid to go down Fifth Street. I don't feel anybody in this community should ever be afraid to go openly in the community like that, especially during those times. And if I do, I go the opposite direction and take a chance at no sidewalk down the street. I feel like it's something very important that really should be addressed. Officers have been there multiple times last school year, multiple, bumper to bumper accidents. I saw a child's bike get whipped right out from underneath them. The child was safe, no injury, but it's soon enough something's gonna happen to somebody. And I live directly across the street in Country Apartments. I see it, I hear it every day, and I think it's something that should literally seriously be considered. Not just for the drivers, but for our community members. Because it's a situation that has me frightful. When my grandchildren want to come over after school, they're 4, 5, 8, 9, and 10. And I'm like, no, Nana will come and meet you around 4:30. Why do I have to think about that? Why should that be something that even crosses my mind? But it does. And I've had communications with the mayor in town about sidewalk, community accessibility, but there at the high school, that's one of the places that scares me the most. And I feel like if somebody is up there and they're watching this after school, they would see what I'm talking about. But I would hate to see another school year come around and more close to accidents happen. Because I'm afraid one of these days, somebody seriously gonna get injured. And I don't wanna see it be me or anybody else. So I would really appreciate if you guys could actually consider this as a safety, as, you know, drivers, people walking. It's important for people that live up there. We've had a lot of us discuss it, talk about it, nobody wants to speak up. So here I am. I rode my wheelchair from the high school area, from my home, to be here. Because it's that important. My medications don't allow me to drive alone. So that is my transportation around the city of Menomonie. And if I don't feel safe, what are other people feeling? I'm 56 and I've got 9-year-olds that live next to me and they won't even go out. And that's a shame.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no.
That was the time limit.
No, that's
Thank
fine,
you.
that was about where I was going anyway, so, but no, thank you for, taking the time to listen to me, and I hope you consider it.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have the personnel consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the personnel consent agenda.
So moved, James.
Second. Tonight we have 1 resignation and 3 new hires. Are there any questions or discussion about any of those items? All right, seeing none, let's vote. As a reminder, it's always sad to see some of our great staff leave and voting no doesn't mean them staying. Do you want to do a voice vote, Jay? Yes, please vote.
Yes.
Yes, you did do a voice vote, but I said yes. Motion passes unanimously. Next up, we have the action agenda. First, we have approval of the preliminary budget for 2026-27. I'll entertain a motion. So moved. Second. Motion by Dominique, second by Angie. Are we looking at anything different from a couple weeks ago when we saw this?
No, it's the same.
Any questions or discussion? There's a lot of documents here, and we really appreciate the amount of effort that went into putting this together. There's no discussion, let's vote. Okay. Will you go again? Oh, so yes, vote from Jane. All right, and motion passes unanimously. Then we have our action item to approve meal prices for 2026-27. I'll entertain a motion.
Amy, so moved.
Second. Motion by Amy, second by Michelle. We have the school meal price increases that we discussed last time. Any questions or discussion about this? Stacey Nelson for putting together such a great presentation last time, like figuring out how to keep our meal prices affordable and stepping up and selling parents. Right, ready to vote?
Then overall parking lot maintenance, will be at the high school this year, so typical patching, crack sealing, and line painting. Only change here is that we are going to start, line painting in-house. We gave it a try this year, earlier this spring on the north side of the high school, and we painted all the parking lot lines there, and that was pretty good. So we should be able to get through this over here with this lines and the ground, and better cost savings. Speaking of maintenance, summer is typically utility is going to be more different. A lot of moving parts, all things people, so it comes to that kind of thing. Going through our service floor. Except if we work in buildings more, open facilities and some like sort of balance, things like that will always be incredibly some months. As well as our like health as needed and like good maintenance, so lines, the really questions and common areas, they were trying to connect on time, because especially at the work, she said that's some programming as another layer of activity points. Maintenance tasks, there's all those types of things that we can get in and out of there is about and less intrusive. So that's our we do have some training scheduled again this summer, later in August. The seats that come in for health and safety training, those grounds. So, but yeah, we have lots. Questions?
I have two questions. First one, the document, in the context of the public comment earlier, what would it take to, I don't ask two sort of questions, you're not kind of prep for it, but given that you're looking at repainting the lines, and maybe the parking lots anyway, what would it take, would it be possible to do some sort of study of what might be possible in green stuff? Because it can see full length. How far is it to get to make that certain?
I don't know what the rules are. That would be up to the contract.
You know, and maybe it was directly connected. But I'm curious if that was really to or do it. Yeah, I mean, I just even like to do that whole topic or something.
I just want to.
But that's something we can look into as we continue our work this summer. I know we did make an adjustment at the middle school last year where during certain times of the day we're only allowing certain traffic patterns to occur. So there is a possibility it's going to take some work. June right now, almost July, but this is something we can try to prioritize and often top on the great plan.
I also wonder if that's, when you talk about like engineering, firms, different things, but I wonder if that's a service that people would offer, if that would be, I could imagine that like engineering the flow of traffic and just parking lot and the whole thing.
The other question was about the pool. That's, been, I think now we're in kind of a third year kind of this ongoing pool. Could you just give a quick synopsis of where we started 3.5 years ago and what what's been fixed and what you still see as remaining on that overall project?
So it all started with cracks in the floor that I was concerned students would get into stuff on the very western edge of the pool deck. So structural supports went into pieces of floor from moving. Once that was done, we upgraded our filtration. The prior system was a big open tank that was happening, when the kind of cold filters all very unsafe. So that was replaced, the heat exchanger was replaced, new controls, all that is up and running. In the process of doing that, we discovered that lines were becoming plugged from late seventies, I forget the year of the pool, which is common for cast iron pipes. So now we're to the point where we're going to go to the deep end, remove them, put new pipe in there, and then fix it for a new tile or a non-tube floor, and make it look good or never happen. And then explore other options such as upgraded bleachers and so on.
I also appreciate the reminder of where we're at and where we've been. Other questions or discussion on any of the items on the summary maintenance plan? Sounds like you've got your work cut out for you, but a good jump on things, so I hope the weather cooperates. Next up, we have a review of the SCMA education for employment plan.
All right, so I'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to invite our career technical education coordinator, Ryan Siri, and middle school counselor Paul Kissler to come on up and assist me with the presentation. Education for employment is an annual requirement that we review. We've seen this before. A little bit of as far as background, included the summary of updates. Like most years, there's a series of editorial updates. We tweaked the formatting based on some updated templates that were available from DPI, but also trying to hold the format that was prior to appreciate how we got it out. Really, some of the big updates that we did this year was to include some additional information that has been part of what we do with employment and academic work plan, that was not necessarily part of the report. So we're really taking a look at the addition of what we do with the family engagement, individualized supports for students with populations, ensuring access to all students. So really, the last two pieces that we added from taking a look at how we prioritize current and future goals. We had academic goals but really trying to incorporate that in part of the process on a basis as well. And then professional development for staff. What we found over the last several years is
5. So in total, we have 383 students that earned dual credits through CDBC, a total of 1,904 credits earned at a state exam for students would have saved if they do decide to take these classes there, over $284,000. So that was a slide that we did have that was ruled as of this year, requested last year. And another one that I included too, and we just got this information last week, so not a day or two before Brian submitted the report, but we included students who earned associate degrees and technical diplomas. One of the things we're trying to do work to do is package or articulate options into an academy for students who earn the certification of merit. Technical diploma, associate's degree, so you can see on the list. Within some of these certifications, technical diplomas are valued in our academies. For instance, the business journalist, we have 4 students in that. A business management academy, we have 12 students in the associate. It's great because it transfers to UW South, also transfers to Madison, and a number of other universities. So it's really great for the kids from the we agree. Electrical maintenance academy, 2 students, and then for nursing assistant, we have 4 students, and that's within Liberty Nursing Academy. So, and students don't get specific diploma for that academy, but they do have a number of classes that are transferred directly to CDBC, and then they'll be accepted Liberty University program, and that'll be part of that. Those were the slides that were uploaded for the last year, and some of them that we
Yeah, I can talk from the middle school standpoint. So I'm Paula Fisher, and I'm one of the at the middle school. Worked with the high school for a few years with Brian, but I'm pretty young. What I love about working at the middle school is we get to be that bridge between the elementary and high school. And we take that very seriously when we do academic and career planning. So I talk with counselors to learn about the soft skills, the employability skills that we're already teaching elementary kids, and then we bridge that right into middle school and start teaching that with our 6th and 7th graders. Our teachers are fantastic. They teach this learning homeroom. So it's taught by all of our staff members. And so then when we get into 8th grade, I take more of a lead role on that because I partner a lot with the high school to make sure that students first know what are the career paths after high school. It's not just college. You know, there's apprenticeships, there's workforce, there's a lot of opportunities right there and not before that. Junior Achievement partnered with us the last 2 years, and they offer Junior Achievement Day and Day, where volunteers will come from the community and do an on-site career event, exploration that they teach lessons on soft skills, on career clusters. They get an entrepreneurship panel where you can hear from local entrepreneurs because that's one of their favorite things, actually. And then they do a career fair with those weeks in our gym. And it's just, you know, it's right there. What are some of the opportunities that high school offers and help with that transition process is being like that. To get kids with either practice in high school or with them, we're partnering with parents all along the way. We offer conferencing individually with parents as requested at the middle school level so that they feel like they're making informed decisions for their child heading into high school. So it's a really nice, awesome bridge to get in school because it kind of culminates all of that and gets them ready for all the cool stuff they got at the high school.
So then to wrap up for questions here, as we presented this evening, this is an opportunity to review. We required on an annual basis to approve this. So this is something that will come back at the next meeting for approval. But at this point, I'm happy to take any questions. And I'll defer
Before we make you answer questions, do you want a bottle of water, Mr.
No, I'm okay. Yeah.
All right, now go ahead, any questions?
Did you say that the prior year industry certification, there were two?
No, we're within two,
Within two? Okay.
within two,
I
yeah.
was like,
Yeah,
that's
I
a
believe
crazy
on seven
number.
real close on this.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
I've been tracking it very closely, and terrific job to all of you, all of our staff. I'm also very well aware that as great a job as we're doing, there's a lot more opportunity to do even better. I know you've had discussions, especially at the high school level, about what maybe some of the barriers are and maybe some of the opportunities. Do you have any comments, any additional comments about, what could be done to even do better next year?
I think one of the things that we're always working towards, and Casey does a great job of, leading our academic and career planning committee, is uncovering all the academic and career planning activities that are going on in this classes. I think a lot of times there's pockets of things going on that maybe we're not aware of. And the inventory of all of that, one of the things we did, with the help of Katie and thanks on that, Katie, we put up a TV in the area, so that way we can hopefully better inform students of the different field trips and different activities that are coming up and to work with them and hopefully better advertise for one of our goals to do is to include all job opportunities. So when students can come to myself or another instructor looking for a job, we can refer them right to that college and all those jobs are posted right there. So those are some of the opportunities as well as I believe that getting into our particular classes where we can and then these academies look for industry certification. That is sort of fun to do. Lots of all the academies. The more we can do that, the better. People that are transportation. So those will be some of the improvements and moving forward.
I think that's terrific. I think having more exposure on TV and things like that will be helpful. I also believe that with direct communication and direct relationships with our staff members is probably even more impactful. Where are our kids getting that direct communication with staff members, and is there any opportunity there for people?
Yeah. I think one, in all the classes, I think academic planning should be embedded in all of the classes. And really, I think whatever it is we teach, we need to inform students, how are they going to use this? And, maybe they can use it in a variety of different ways, whatnot. That's one area. Also our homerooms too. And, we're in contact, homeroom instructors are in contact with the kids every day. And what a great time to, I just feel that's one of the most important things is to get to know the kids. And if you get to know the kids, I think from that point, good thing. Get a whole person with what their interests are, what they will assign to school, what the plans are. We have to,
I think that's terrific, and I think many of our teachers, like you, do a wonderful
these, because knowing that, we have, only 64% of our students go on to a 2 or 4 year school, what are those other options? And what does that look like? And making sure that, our staff are well aware of how those institutions in and of themselves have changed over the last 25, years.
I just wanted to, thank the added slides and the attention to what folks were asking for, what we were all asking for last year. I'll admit I forgot some of the things I asked for, but it was really nice to be here and that what we're I really appreciate that attention to detail, and, I really wanted to express support for the model of middle school, like, I'm aware of all of this stuff going on, and the kind of conversations that we're bringing home are, it's fascinating to me, because I don't think that middle school, so, thank you. Any final questions or discussion? So we will vote on this to approve this report at our next meeting. Thank you. And next up, as we shuffle through again, we have the research report. Thank you for being here.
Well, Sam is getting her stuff readjusted. I know board members, there's a lot of data in these slides, and it's important data. In the interest of time, I have asked Sam to kind of hit the high points and make sure there's time for questions. But so she's going to go through the slides relatively quick, but please be sure to ask any questions you might have.
That's his way of saying that I can be long-winded.
No, not at all.
All right, thank you for going through all of this with me. So just want to remind everyone that this report that's generated, all of the information that I pulled, runs from July 1st of 2025 through June 30th of 2026. So barring a resignation tonight or tomorrow, it should be as updated as possible. A couple of things that I just want to highlight on the slides. If you look at, I believe it's the third slide where we talk about the total number of employees and break it down by classification group. Last year, and again, we don't have this information in front of you, but I'm just going to do a few quick comparables. Last year, we had a total of 406, I should say, for the 24-25 school year, we had a total of 463 employees. This year, we have 448, and of course, that is attributed to Dallasville closing, and then those positions being acquired into other positions within the district. So looking at the next slide, just the percentage of years of experience, or years with our district, I should say, about 50% of our staff is within the first 5 years of employment. Keep in mind that this is not just teachers, this includes all of our employees. So it includes our paras, our custodial, our school nutrition, and about 70% of our employees are within their first 10 years. So we have a very young staff, which is I should say, it's a staff that has been with us for a shorter period of time. It doesn't necessarily equate to age. It's just the time that they've been with us. I think that this is probably reflective of the environment that we see, where there is a lot of movement, more movement probably than 10, 15, 20 years ago with our staff. Just more opportunities for people. Any questions about those first two slides? Okay. I'm going to flip into the exiting staff statistics. I know that this is something that previously the board has kind of asked about, and specifically the exit survey. So I have more results of that, and I will get to that in just a second. But looking at the number of teachers that resign, there is a bit of an increase over last year. And again, it kind of tends to be a bit of a free market. The other thing that we see is we do see a lot of people moving for personal reasons, leaving the district for personal reasons. I see not all that many people that are leaving to go to other districts. Most of the reasons that they're leaving is for personal and mostly for relocation. They're following a significant other, they're moving back home, and that tends to be the trend overall. And we will see that too, on one of the next slides.
Dan, can I ask you real quick? I just want to clarify on the far right column, that percentages, does that mean the percent of total staff that resign?
Right, okay. Well, so if we're looking at the teachers, the 3.82% that's teachers that resign, that's of the total staff. But when we look at that compared to just the group of teachers, it ends up being 6.8%. So if you compare to the overall group, it's the 3.82%. But if you compare to just the teacher classification, it ends up being 6.8%. Does that make sense? With that. And then I know paraeducators, this was an area that we really kind of honed in on last year and wanted to really talk about last year, and make sure that we did some things to try to improve keeping our paras. Again, there are a lot of things that I feel like we're doing well. I think that there are some things that we do need to improve. Onboarding and training is one of those pieces that I really want to focus on for this year, working with Tonya to roll out our handbook and do some mentorship with our paras. I think there are a couple of ideas that we're really looking at. So there was an increase from 22 or from 14 to 22 paras that resigned. I just wanted to note in there that 3 of those paras, however, this last year are being promoted into teacher positions. So we bring them in as paras, they do an amazing job for us, they finish up their degrees, and we find a spot for them in the classroom because we don't want to lose them and we understand their value. Any questions about those girls? Usually I know that, in the exit surveys, they will sometimes mention things. That's more of a Google form and it's a wide variety of questions. And so a lot of times I will have had a discussion with them, and just kind of know why they're leaving. Same thing, with them. I'm just looking at it, I have everybody kind of on a grid, and, most of those are leaving for personal or other personal reasons or other positions. So without getting into too much detail, as compared to like moving to a different district, or just like the elimination of their position or a termination, most of those are for personal or other reasons on the job.
And I can add to that a little bit. We have noticed with the hiring process since the pandemic, with unemployment being so low in the region, really across the country, there's a lot of job opportunity. And like Sam said, I think it's a real mixture. Certainly some of it is compensation, some of it is preferred hours, preferred opportunities for growth, advancement. The other thing, our paras are limited to being a partial year, it's a school year position. And what we have heard, especially with the high cost of benefits, more and more people are not able to work in a position that is only 9 or 10 months a year. So we've had several people leave for 12-month positions in a different type of profession.
And I would say too, one of the things that we've done to combat that, we heard from our staff that winter break is a very difficult time for them because it can be 2 weeks without income. And so what we have done is we took 2 of our holidays, Memorial Day and Labor Day, and moved those to that time. So they actually get 4 days of holiday pay in that 2-week period. And so I think that has been appreciated. And that was one of the things that we did to try to help balance that out a little bit.
That was the same question I had, so most of it was answered. I'm curious about, I know we covered sort of the compensation involved in the issue. I'm curious about if you have a sense of if there's a sort of divide with people getting the job and not knowing what it entails. Because I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I think that that's a fair question, and we really, and I emphasize that with my principals, and if I'm sitting in an interview, we really do try to help them understand what it is that they are going to be doing, so that they know at the interview process, what that's going to look like, what their position is going to look like. But there have been times, yes, where a pair has been hired, they've worked for a few weeks and they realize that the job isn't for them. But I also think that happens in a lot of other places as well.
It does, but I think it happens more with our paraeducators than it does with teachers, for instance. Another thing is many of our paras are working with children with very high needs, in some cases medical needs. And we've had situations too where a para has been hired, understanding what the position was, but when it actually comes time to need to perform some of the duties, either it's a lack of confidence or realizing that those duties are more than what they sounded like. So that's part of it as well.
That's one of the things we want to work on, is pairing them up with a mentor so that they have somebody that they can go to. But I will say that, like, when I go into the buildings and I talk with our special ed teachers and I talk with our parents, those that stay are very happy. We all have challenging days and they will talk about their challenging days, but they really form a strong unit, working together. And so that's a big part of it too, is just having that sense of belonging and that support, to help get them through those days. Good questions. As I mentioned, we're going to move on to the slide that just says exiting teachers, and it has the little people on it. And so you'll see this is just specific to the teachers. So this year we had 16 teachers, and that's updated as of, like I said, today. And so we had 4 that accepted a position in a different district, 3 that accepted positions outside of public education, and then 10 that I would consider to be either personal reasons or relocation. Kind of put those together because they seem to be related. Moving on to the exit survey, a couple of things just to note with that. We did work very hard to really beef up people doing the exit survey. I will say that we had a bit of a lull. We're down 9 as compared to last year. When Bethany left and we had some transition within the HR department, that was one of the things that got dropped a little bit, was sending out that exit survey when somebody resigned. And so I worked really hard with Sydney to get that up to speed and making sure that, especially at the end of the year as people are leaving, that we're getting those exit surveys out. So that will continue, I believe, to go up, but a small dip, I think, just because of that transition with Bethany leaving. The other thing that I want to note on there is from last year I should say from 24-25 to 25-26, our lowest was benefits at that 2.21 out of 5 in 24-25. And I want to make a note to let you know that this year, benefits in that exit survey jumped up to 3.7 out of 5. And what we saw a lot in the exit surveys, and believe me, I read those when they come in, I go back and read them again. At the end of the year, I come back and I kind of synthesize everything together. But we really jumped in that regard. And I do believe that adding Innovia, adding the HSA, kind of curtailing our benefits to our staff has been very helpful. That's one of the, Innovia was mentioned several times in that, but just the overall numbers really increased. People, maybe before, we were seeing trends of benefits being given a 1 or a 2, are now up to like a 3 or a 4. So that's been pretty consistent.
And just a reminder, Novia is our near site plan.
Sorry, I assumed that sometimes. And then the lowest that came through this year was a 3.1 with initial training. And so you'll hear a little bit more about this later, but this is going to be one of our goals, one of our focuses for 26-27. So any questions about the exit survey? And then the last part is just our substitutes. And so I just want to mention real quickly, and I'm going to put a note, I already did this for next year, but the numbers don't always like add up. So we have 79 active subs. It is down a little bit, and I attribute that to there are a lot of opportunities and people that typically have subbed for us before are maybe finding full-time jobs and therefore are not necessarily signing up to be part of our sub pool. But one thing to notice is that when our subs sign up, they don't just sign up for one classification. They sign up for multiple things. So they will sign up to sub as a teacher, to sub as a para, and to sub as clerical. That's just one example. So they can click and choose whichever ones they want to see on a daily basis. And so if you're adding up like the total subs in each of those classifications, it's not going to come up to 79 simply because they're counted multiple times in each of those classifications. So I asked Sid to tell me about the fill rates for our positions, and we had about a 70% fill rate overall this year, which is not great. When we just looked at teachers and paras, those are primarily the bulk of what we get subs for. We had a great percentage with our teachers. About 90% of our positions went filled for teachers. However, about 50% of our para positions went unfilled this year. So again, that's something that we're going to continue to look at, continue to work on in a couple of different ways. So that takes care of the report. Any questions?
On the left side of the total sub number is a pretty dramatic decrease in the last couple of years. So hopefully that can be brought up to the level we need to cover action.
Yeah. A couple years ago, we did a couple of incentives. So we had additional, I think we put an additional like $10 on Mondays and Fridays to entice subs to come in during that time. But then as we didn't need that anymore, that kind of went away. We do have the incentive of a free lunch for our teacher subs. And then we also, for any of our subs, or for I should say for the teacher subs, there's a $10 per day increase after 30 days that they have subbed. They also get a free pass to games, like a free activities pass, and they can also use the full field house. So we try to incentivize, and I think we need to kind of put that out there again and let subs know that those are some of the additional benefits to subbing.
I apologize for this question of I'm curious about, like I think maybe Eau Claire, and they're bigger than us, but uses like a different company, I think, to help source subs. Do you have any like thoughts about like if that would be a benefit or if we're headed that direction, or if that's not something we would ever need?
There are a lot of benefits, and believe me, I've looked into that. There are a number of different companies that will do that kind of handle your subbing for you. They don't always take care of the last minute pieces. We would still have to do that, and they're very, very expensive. At this point, because of the sub model that we have at the high school, we do not have to get subs for like our general ed classrooms. Those students come down to the commons area. And so when they price that out, when they price out what it would cost us, they do that based on the number of employees that you have. And so that isn't even a consideration. And so it becomes very costly for us to do that. So much more than the benefit. And again, we would still handle the last minute pieces. We would still have to have one of our clerical people calling in the morning trying to fill some of those positions. So for a couple of reasons, I haven't gone in that direction, mainly because of cost, but there are certainly benefits as well. And then those are not our employees, and so there are some benefits that go along with that, with regard to like rehiring our retired teachers, and so I have weighed those options. At this time, I just don't see it financially being a move that we can make.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. I was just curious if having like those, but it sounds like, first of all, the cost would be.
Yes.
Hi, Sam. My question is, first my comment, then my question, 50% for the para's absence is not filled, that's concerning. I'm wondering what, if it, like, is there any brainstorming happening of what could happen to try to help fix that, or what other districts are doing, or is that a need that is typical? We see, is it happening every year, or is this for some reason an odd year? Or?
No, that's pretty typical. And when I talk to other districts as well, they also have a very hard time filling their para positions. I think that 50% is about 50 to 70% tends to be about the correct number that other districts experience as well. And for the same reasons that we have a hard time, I think, keeping our paras, it's a very physically and emotionally demanding job. And so even though we increase our pay every year, it still is very challenging to find people that want to do that. We also have a lot of our teacher subs that sign up to be paras, but they will obviously choose a teacher position over a para position because it pays better most of the time. And so that's where we end up, like sometimes we'll have somebody in a para position, but then last minute we get a teacher absence. And so we will ask them to move into the teacher position. So it's a tricky balance. Tony and I talk about it quite a bit. I do talk with other HR directors. Kind of, this is one of the things that we're to dig into and again, really try to hone in on this year.
Prior to that, you already said you were looking on that, like, in terms of that, something that you need to work on. So I appreciate that you're on to that.
Yeah.
And so, thank you, guys. Thank you.
Any additional questions or discussion about the HR report? I do have one more question. And Michelle kind of sparked this for me. And I'm not really sure if this is a question for you. I'm curious about what 50% of absences unfilled, like what that looks like for parents, what that looks like in terms of like hours of support for like our students who, typically our parents are working with students that are kind of required to have help. And so then like what kind of a strain is that putting on kids getting the services that they need, if that makes sense? Like, no, it might be outside of this report.
No, and you're right. That's one, again, that's why Tony and I work so closely on this piece of it, because the minutes of instruction are important and required. And so what happens is then other paras kind of shift their day to make sure that those students are getting the support that they need. And it really becomes more of a team effort, but then that pulls people in different directions. And so we recognize how hard that is. And, you know, we do try to work with our paras, especially if we have some that maybe absenteeism is an issue. We will work with people individually to try to figure out where the barriers are. But in general, that's what happens is they just kind of pull from kind of spread our other paras more thin, or the teachers will kind of change up their schedule a little bit to provide support.
Yeah, that's a tricky kind of pendulum, because then it's not just that one teacher and the kids they work with that aren't getting like a normal day. It extends beyond that, of a lot of people who aren't getting their routine, right, which is tricky.
Yeah, and I'll add to that as well. I've seen this pendulum go back and forth, where for a while it was, maybe reduce the number of teaching staff and increase the number of support staff. And, it's gone back and forth, kind of depending on finances, depending on employment pools, depending on licensing requirements. There's all sorts of inputs to that equation. Oh, one thing that we're very fortunate is the intervention model that we have. And I'm not saying it's a silver bullet where we don't have to worry about parents being gone, because it is impactful for sure. But the fact that we do have extra educators providing service through our interventions, both academically and behaviorally, we're in a much better position now compared to what, Brian, 4, 5, 6 years ago. It would be a way different situation. But regardless, not having positions filled is very difficult.
I just also wanted to mention that I appreciate that you are brainstorming that with other HR directors and working with the districts. And my computer went to sleep while I was talking, but, and again, this was an excellent report, and I also just, as with the previous report, it's really, really nice, that when we have questions or want more information 1 year, to just like, see it come back on next year, so appreciate that effort. Absolutely, thank you. If there are no more questions or discussion about the HR report, we will move on to review of the strategic planning goals and major activities for 2025-26.
Well, we're super excited to be able to share our final report with you of progress made on our strategic plan during the past school year. Like we have said in other quarterly updates, it's been a major collaborative effort. Nothing on this list would have been accomplished without the great work of our entire staff, from our paras and teachers to our other support staff members, to the principals and administrative team. Everyone has really worked hard to accomplish the goals and meet the expectations that were laid out last summer. We aren't going to go through each one item by item, because we're looking at over almost 30 pages. But what we're going to do is similar to some of the previous updates. We're going to mention one area of each pillar. And actually, some of the items you've already heard about tonight, like for instance, academic career planning. What we heard about, that was part of our Pillar 1 goals. But we also wanted to take a minute for Pillar 1, which is preparing our students, to hear from high school principal Casey Drake. If you remember, Casey Drake was here last fall talking about some of the major initiatives at the high school and the progress being made. He could now follow up with some year-end comments. And Mr. Drake, we're talking about Pillar 1, please take it away.
Thanks for having me tonight. So I guess tonight really I'd like to highlight some positive things from this school year. Like Mr. Dr. Felty said, we got a lot of people with a lot of different roles that help to get these results. Like I said, I just want to highlight a few. So ACT for our juniors, going to be seniors, did a nice job again this year. A couple of things that took place initially, we maybe thought we had taken a little bit of a step backwards. It was kind of disappointing. However, the ACT had a scoring issue, if you had not heard about that. And so all student scores were re-looked at. And then, at least in Menomonie High School, I would estimate maybe around 60 or 70% of the kids' scores increased a little bit, which bumped our average up, which was great. On top of that, science had been calculated in the composite score for a number of years prior to this year, and this year is the first year it's not. So when you looked at the initial score of 19.4 after that adjustment, compared to last year's, which was 20 even, it was still a little bit lower. However, last year's was with that science score in, which our science score normally is above our actual composite average. So when you kind of calculate that all together, and Brian can probably jump in here if he needs to, but it's somewhere around a 19.8 or 19.7 if we compare last year's with the adjustments to this year. So pretty close to what we had last year as well. And last year was one of the better ACT scores we've had in quite some time. So kind of getting through all of that, we're pretty happy with our ACT score for our going-to-be seniors, and looking forward to continuing with that. It's one of the things that Dr. Zalewski mentioned too, is that we're making good progress, but this is still something we want to continue to prioritize as we go into the coming year. So that would be one. One of the things that I think we worked really hard on as a building is getting our kids to do well enough to pass in our courses. And we've been tracking for the last handful of years failure rates of our students within the school. And we look at different cohorts as they go through grade levels and then the whole building as well. And I think in the update that was provided in the board docs, it talked about first semester numbers. Since that's been submitted, we've also been able to calculate the second semester numbers, and this current, or the school year we just finished, second semester had the lowest building failure rate since before 2016-17. So like a 10-year period. I don't have any data prior to 16-17, so maybe it goes back even further than that. But it was 4.75 of all the classes with all the kids in the high school. Only 4.75% for failures, which is really good for us. We've seen some numbers quite a bit higher than that, and we kind of consistently have been seeing a downward trend in the failures, which is really can be attributed to the great classes that we have. Teachers spend a lot of time with our students, the work that's going in during our study hall time, and just really a re-emphasis on making academics even more of a priority than it's been in the past. So that was some very positive news. Attendance, another area which we've been focusing on over the last handful of years. Kind of two different ways to look at attendance. One is chronic absenteeism, which is how the state scores us for our state report card. This is any student that is absent 10% or more throughout the school year. They would be considered chronically absent. So that's 17 days roughly in a school year, and this is not, the state does not look at it like they don't differentiate between excused or unexcused. So if my kid is sick and I call in my kid, that still counts as an absence and one of those 17 days in this model that the state has. So in 22-23, we had 31% of our students that met that. And this current year, we're at 21%. So a pretty big drop over the last handful of years with that. The other way attendance is measured is the overall building attendance rate. So this is just simply looking at all the kids in the building, all the class periods that they all attend for all 170 some days of school, what percent of the kids actually attending. We've seen an upward trend in that, which is great. In 22-23, we're at 88.7%, and this current year we're at 91.8, so up just over 3% in those handful of years. At the same time, with that measurement, the state has also gone up, but the state's gone up less than 1%, where we're just over 3%. So we're going at a little bit higher rate than what the state's doing. So that's some positive pieces there, but again, one of these things, I feel like we're in the middle of a positive trend. I celebrate for sure, but what can we do as we continue to go forward to keep moving that needle in the right direction? And the last thing that I just want to highlight is the graduation rate. This current year, we have 97.1% of our kids graduating on time, which is wonderful. Just a few years ago, we were 94%, 92%, 93% the last couple of years. So this was a good year in terms of getting kids across the finish line and earning that diploma.
Before we take any questions from Mr. Drake, I just want to point out with those ACT scores. I know Mr. Drake's very humble, but last year when we had the report, that was the highest year on record for our school since ACT became a test that every student had to take. So last year was like the highest bar, and this year basically is right there. And that's two different cohorts of students with different makeups. And Brian and I looked at it and talked a lot about it. What happened at the high school was very, very impressive. So great job. Thank you.
I was just curious, you mentioned all the different positive things that you've done to make sure that this is happening. I was wondering about cell phones. I'm wondering if it's more consistent and develop that, because I know I talked to some students when I was there from, I think, a civil class or whatever, civics class, and they were they understood why they couldn't have their phones out. They understood that, they weren't happy about it, but they understood, and I thought that was pretty cool. So I was just wondering how that's going.
Yeah, this has been an ongoing project for us too, just really limiting cell phone access for kids during the school day. This past year, we doubled down on that again. One of the things different this year than previous years, what we did, the administrative team had regular check-ins, different times of the day throughout the semester, where we would really just gather data in terms of getting into classrooms for the whole building, just seeing what we're seeing and kind of jotting down the data and then sharing that back out with staff. We recognize that sometimes students are going to misuse their technology in front of them, like their Chromebooks. They might try to sneak their phone when the teachers are across the room helping somebody else and have that out as well. But limiting that and making what you mentioned as your comment, making kids very aware of why we're doing that, has really been helpful, over the past couple of years. I'm happy to report too, like the results from what we were able to collect in terms of data and how often we see a student with a cell phone or, trying to misuse their Chromebook or something that's not academic related, pretty low. And then that also gave us really good starting points in conversation with those staff members of, yeah, I know you're working really hard with these 3 kids in a small group over here, but at the same time, something that should be happening in class was happening. They may have not been aware of that, but then for them to be able to address that with students as well was a positive. So I think that, from 2 years ago to this past year, I think we've taken some really good steps in that direction too.
Thank you. All right, so if there's no more questions or discussion on pillar 1, are you ready to move on?
Keep moving. But again, ACP was a pillar 1, the high school improvement plan, pillar 1, great job. Pillar 2, the board actually has heard about pillar 2 quite a bit in the last several weeks. Tony Kwiski gave her student services report, where the efforts around MLSS, multiple systems of support, and then also addressing bullying and harassment. Tony reported on that in June, earlier this month. So I just want to point out that the principals did a wonderful job with their relationship mapping results. This has been an ongoing goal for several years now, where we try to get every single student in our school district having at least one adult that they feel like they can trust. And you can see that the results were quite impressive again this past school year. Next, into pillar 3, that really is all about our staff, and Sam already went through the HR report today. So I think that was the biggest thing we wanted to highlight there. Also, as you know, we had our teacher compensation plan. We had some real good changes approved by the board there earlier in the year. So we feel like a lot has been done. And there's always more to do with professional development, but we think that there's been a lot of progress made in pillar 3 with supporting our staff. Pillar 4, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to ask Katie Grieger to come up here and drive Jenny's device for a few minutes. Pillar 4 is about enhancing family and community partnerships, and we obviously have a lot of partnerships to celebrate. But also one of the things under Pillar 4 was that we wanted to do a better job with communications, and the board's well aware of Parent Square and the work that has been done for messaging from our building principals, from the district, from our teachers home to parents. But another piece to our puzzle is actually updating our school district website. So what's actually just gone live in the last, 48 hours or something, is our new school district website. I will say, anytime you roll out a new website, it's a bit under construction, but you can already really see some nice improvements. And from there, I'll ask Katie just to give you a little bit of a tour. And then also I want to talk about the feedback loop that we've created to make sure that we are able to get feedback from our stakeholders.
Sure. On the page, actually, I'll start with the feedback loop. Don't want to mess up Jen's screen, so I'm kind of driving backwards here. But I do have a pop-up that comes up soliciting some feedback on the new site, and then once I clear it, it just stays on the site, and then we go back to it, and then more permanently. It's also linked at the bottom of each of the school pages and the district page. You can see we have district information on each of these. A parents and community section. And again, like Joe said, some things are under development, so some of the pages may be in progress of being created, but hidden until they're completed. Activities and athletics, some staff links in our plan. You'll also see we have popular links up here for some quick access. We have some nice icons for easy navigation to some of our main things. We have a lot of consistency between our building pages and district pages, where we have a little more appealing images throughout. Consistent links to our strategic plan, which I think is a nice highlight, and then core values for the building. And then you can see the Parent Square posts. things that principals and Joe are sending out get posted to either the building or the district page, which is really nice. And then we have links. Right now, you'll see mostly the activities calendar events, but they can click here and then see a full calendar too. So just a lot of nice quick highlights. Obviously much more graphically appealing than I would say.
So just a few things to add. One of the most common complaints that we had about our old site was how it scaled to mobile devices. It was pretty poor. This new website scales very well to mobile devices, and we know that most people are accessing this information either on a phone or a tablet. So we're very happy with that. We know that there's going to have to be some more work, but we've also heard from people in the past about the most important things, why they go to the website. We think that the calendar that is being built is much more accurate, and it's going to include more information that's going to be easier to access for family members, community members, and staff members. And then, like Katie said, to have those different sections, even though it scrolls a little bit different because it is made for mobile access, it really is pretty amazing to see how much information. School menu, for instance, I think that's always been number one, is where can we find the meal menu and lunch menu. So we have those nice icons that Katie pointed out. But we don't need to go in much more detail tonight other than just to kind of show you an initial introduction. But what I'm really happy is we have that feedback loop, so that as people are on the website and they can find things or don't find things, they can shoot us a note, and then we can either help them or we can make a modification to the website. Lastly, I want to point out, and I know Katie has presented this in some of her other reports, this website is designed to be accessible. And there have been rules and regulations that have changed in terms of how websites can operate. And how certain things that are loaded onto the website need to be able to be accessed by someone using a screen reader. We are really working hard to build our website in a way that is accessible. So it is going to be a change. For instance, we are going to upload our PDF, a version of the district calendar, for one more year. Because the final rules and regulations don't go into effect until this coming April, and we know people are used to the one-page PDF. But we will be phasing that out after this next year. But we also feel that once people get used to our new calendar, we think it's actually going to be a better tool and it'll be more accessible. So we're trying to kind of move it in a gradual process to help people make the adjustment. We'll still be mindful of the importance of meeting all the rules and regulations. Any questions?
Overall, I just want to say it was great. It is much easier to navigate. It looks nice, and I really do appreciate those popular links at the top. One of my silly little kind of unimportant pet peeves was how far I just scroll to get to Skyward Family Access. I like that top. What is the plan for populating that activities calendar? Because I know that's something that I heard a lot of people about before, that you didn't necessarily find everything. It kind of was dependent on, my understanding was previously dependent on kind of having coaches or advisors making the effort.
There were some real challenges with activity and athletics calendars. What I can tell you is that Mr. Riley, he's only been our activities director, I think this is going on his third year now, and he's had to deal with 4 different adoptions of different scheduling platforms. We think that, and this has been like a group decision by the different activities directors, not only in the Big Rivers Conference, but really in the state. And my understanding is that the last one was adopted for about 3 months and quickly abandoned. The one that's been adopted now, there's a lot of hope that it is not only better than what there was, but it also has the structural support where it's going to continue to get better. And one thing I'm really excited is not only does it have the sports schedules, but it also has concert schedules, for fine art schedules, and it's a one-stop shop. I've heard from so many parents and friends and community members, so what website do you actually go on to find the football schedule or the orchestra schedule? Because there were about 3 or 4 different avenues. this is all gonna be a one-stop shop now, so we think that issue is fixed.
And you anticipate like being able to have the staff training to make sure that all gets populated, or is there a way that?
And actually, the way it happens, most items, it happens by the activities directors when they send contracts back and forth. When that contract is generated, it's automatically scheduled into the system. Now, there is gonna be some local control and some local manipulation, especially at the middle school level. I know Katie's been working with staff at the middle school to make sure that their stuff gets updated because the activities directors don't contract out in the same way. But we think that there's been a workaround that should make it very accurate.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
As I was looking around, I noticed that in order to get a hold of a teacher, you had, instead of sending a direct email, it's like a place where you put in your information and then, they'll get back to you kind of thing, which I think is good. I think it makes people serious about when they want to, contact somebody, which is good. And then I'm going to just tell you a little bit, I thought I was pretty tech savvy. I mean, I run the live stream at my church every Sunday, but I learned something new that I didn't know. And I'm thinking you're going to laugh at me, but I laughed at myself. But when I went on the site, I was looking for the district email where I could access my email. And I couldn't find it. And I kept thinking, well, how am I going to find it? I can get it from my phone, but it's there. But then how do I look at it when I need to have it bigger on my computer? So I was back and forth with Joe, texting about this. And he finally said, well, it's not going to be on there because you can go to your Gmail account. It comes up and you put your email in it. Duh. So anyhow, I just want to let you know that I didn't mean to cause so much disruption with that. But I learned something new.
Full disclosure, I had to ask Katie, and that's what she told me.
Let's say another reason we went to the form as opposed to putting like email addresses in plain text is partly because we want people to use Parent Square for that communication piece and direct messages, but also we've talked a lot about cybersecurity and the number of phishing attacks, and when we have those addresses in plain text, it's really easy for AI bots and stuff to just scrape your website, collect all of those, and start sending you all kinds of fun stuff. So that just puts an extra barrier between us and some of those other tools that are being used.
I think that's really smart.
Well, I'm good now that I understand.
Good.
Go ahead. Are there any other questions or discussion about the website in particular? Okay, thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Katie. So to keep moving, and I know this is going a little bit long, that was Pillar 4, this engagement with the community. Pillar 5 really is about operating efficiently and managing our resources efficiently and effectively. And what I want to comment there, the board has done a great job all year, and what we've done with how we've dealt with our long-term debt, how we had our representative from Fair here. There's so many great examples, but we don't need to go into those details. What I want to point out for this last update is the very last item. And this is an item that the board added last summer, and it was about accountability. And it was about accountability for our strategic planning goals and a scorecard. And Brian has done a wonderful job over all the years really creating scorecards. And Brian, if you could just maybe comment on the scorecard, and then I'm sure this is something we'll be loading to our website as well.
Yeah, taking that idea that we've used in the past and the desire to build in accountability for the strategic plan, this is a tool that will continue to grow over time. But as you look at the layout of the scorecard, and I'm not going to go through showing the pillars on it, but really the format is laid out where it has each pillar clearly stated and what is the overarching goal for that. And then if you remember when we did work on the strategic plan, you identified a list of identified key performance indicators or KPIs, which is a very common piece for measuring organizational goals. And what this is doing is, it provides an opportunity for us to identify on an annual basis, but then also link in the work plan for each year of the strategic plan and track how we're doing on the goals. Now, you'll notice that what's listed right now is outcome and then, goals met for 24, 25, because the majority of the KPIs that we have, that data lags about a year as we go through. So the updates that you get on a quarterly basis, talk about work plans, but then as we take a look as that data trickles in, really like our school report cards that will come in the fall and things like that, then we'll be able to build for each year whether or not that outcome goal was met or not. And then, like I said, there's a spot then for each action or each work plan to be linked in, and then for us to track that over time. So as Joe said, the idea of linking this then to our website, like we've done in the past, but making it real easy to interpret for somebody who doesn't sit through those quarterly updates or attend this end of year meeting as well.
Yeah, this is really great, and I do appreciate the link. I think this is a good format where you've got the whole strategic plan and a very concise summary of those performance indicators, and then a link to the annual work plan, so that someone can track this and like kind of look at it without having to read through that 37-page document.
Full disclosure, when I started, it was really hard for me to get into the weeds, so.
I'm surprised.
After the team, we're able to get it to look like this.
Great.
So that's our work plan update. Any other questions or comments?
I just want to acknowledge that this is the end of the yearly work plan, and it's just really, we've been joking about the length of this document, but it is really incredible to see the work that's been done, and the way that all of these very ambitious goals have been met throughout the year. So thank you to everybody. All right, if there's no further questions or discussion on the work plan, we will move on to discuss property insurance renewal for the Downsville School site.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel, and thanks for the nice compliment on the work plan. And this is actually going to be a little bit of a transitional agenda item, because then we're going to talk about next year's work plan. But this is very important, and as you know, with Downsville Elementary closed, there has been work with Adam Akala, the Executive Director of Dunn County Economic Development. There's things in the works that the board will see some more information on in July. But what we know is that we're still going to have that building for a time period here, most likely for the rest of 2026 and maybe even into 2027. And in previous years, we were able to continue having that building insured through our normal district insurance. But I appreciate the legwork that Eric did. We no longer can have the building insured that way. So Eric, could you explain just a little bit about what that means for our insurance premiums for next year?
Sure. So as Joe said, so 25, 26, our property coverage, our property premium was $161,000 for all properties. And that was because Liberty Mutual reluctantly added Downsville into that property plan. So then this next year for 26, 27, said we would no longer insure it because it is a vacant building. And vacant buildings are very difficult to insure. So they refused to do it. Our insurance, regular property insurance, went from $161,000 to $145,000, which again, that's without Downsville. Sounds like good news.
So 16,000?
Yes, correct. It went down to about 16,000. However, then that means Downsville is not insured. So just a few days ago, our insurance broker was able to get coverage, and actually it started out as a premium of $53,000 just to insure Downsville, went down to $32,000, and now it is down to $25,000. So $25,000 is what it would be under a separate sort of coverage of vacant property coverage. $25,000 plus a few like broker fees and an inspection fee, or other fees that go along with it. So our regular insurance went down about 10% then, from 161 to 145. However, when you include the Downsville, and again, that's around 25,000, our insurance costs would go up 11,000 or about 7% then for next year. That includes the insurance of Downsville, the vacant building coverage.
So the reason why we're bringing this to you is that we are planning to insure the property in Downsville, but we wanted to let you know that it is gonna be a net increase of about 10, 11,000, somewhere in there. We could have the option of self-insuring, and not insuring the property, but I think politically that could be real problematic in the event that there was a major catastrophe. I think even though it's, hard to spend the money, I think it's a wise decision, and that's what we plan to do unless there's an objection from the board.
I just have a question, having never attempted to insure a vacant building myself, like what is the threshold of usage at which a insurer refuses to cover? Because that building is not being used on a daily basis, but I have understood from our maintenance reports that we are doing the work of, running the water and checking the heaters and doing the things, so it's far from an abandoned building. So I'm curious, and maybe you can't answer this, but like, what would Liberty Mutual take to say, like, you're taking care of this building?
And I'm not sure of that. No, I did work with Kevin, and he said, at minimum, there is a person in that building once every 2 weeks, but even it's more like once a week. And I did express that to our broker to say, please sell that point, like there's still people in the building. It is not on a daily basis. But again, I'm not sure which threshold that is, but it was made clear that there are people in this building, but still it is considered a vacant building.
I realize that you have no decision-making power. I just think that there ought to be a way to convince them of it. Any other questions or discussion about the insurance renewal?
Is it possible to get a refund if we were to sell the building?
I would have to ask, but I would guess there would be, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I would imagine at some point that could also be part of the sale negotiation, if we were at that point before the term ended.
In terms of the payments that we make on insurance,
We pay a lump sum at the beginning, but yes.
Is this something that we would need to vote on?
no, there's no need for a vote. We just wanted to make sure we kept the board informed.
Right, I do think it is the right decision to keep the building insured. So if there's no further questions or discussion, we'll move on to discussing strategic planning goals and major activities for 2026-27.
So it feels a little bit funny to do this right after we got done celebrating all the work we did in the past work plan. But this process really is envied by a lot of school districts. It is such a solid process to make sure that we're aligning our efforts with the will and expectations of the board and the community represented by the board members here. So one thing we did different this year is we made a more conscious effort to really reach out to our staff to see any suggestions that staff members had for how we can better accomplish the goals of our strategic plan. So I'm happy to say that there's more feedback into this preliminary draft than what we've had that I can remember. And it is very helpful. Certainly our administrative team has a lot of feedback as well. And the board, through all the meetings and the direction that you give us throughout the year. So you can see that we do have an initial draft of goals. It's pretty rigorous. There's multiple goals under each pillar. Some of the things like onboarding new staff members like Sam talked about tonight. Some of the things with pillar 1, with continuing our work with our curriculum mapping and our academic career plans. Those things are already reflected in here. But I wanted to take an opportunity to see if the board has additional thoughts. Ultimately, we would like to bring this back to you for your approval so that we have kind of a stamped work plan for moving forward. But now would be a great time in case there are additional goals that we need to work on developing and bring back to you before you approve it.
Something I'm sure you're going to do anyway, but I think it's worth noting. I think this probably goes to pillar 5, is that a year from now will be the next discussions in the legislature of the budget cycle. And so you'll probably be tracking that with WASDA, et cetera, and trying to understand what impacts our state funding changes and all the other efforts that go along with that.
I think that's perfect, Dave. We'll draft up something for the board to consider. Thank you. Great input.
To that end, in Pillar 5, I was also curious, last year we had I'm not gonna find it, I'm not gonna do it. But last year we had an item that had to do with, communicating about the, financial situation of the school district and the needs that will be coming in the future. And I don't see that here, and I don't think you'll stop doing it. But I think that it's something to, I would like to see it kept in there, if that makes sense.
That's a good point. And also, I know the board has been doing a lot of work with a communications plan. I wonder if Pillar 4 might not be a bad spot for something about, because really this is a kind of a directing the administrative team and the staff for the district, but direction to support the board's efforts with the communication plan might be a reasonable goal for Pillar 4. Do you think that is?
Yeah. I had a question about the first item in Pillar 3, to maximize staff efficacy. Building principals will facilitate the collaborative renewal, et cetera, et cetera. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I love the question, Rachel. And this is something that we've talked about with the administrative team, especially the building principals. And I'm sure board members, you've heard of the research done by John Hattie and talking about effect size and how there's all sorts of different things that schools have done to try to increase student achievement. And John Hattie did research, and whether it be talking about lower class sizes or using, the newest bells and whistles in the classroom, whatever it may be, and then different measurements have taken place to try to see what kind of effect that those changes have had on students' achievement. And one of the greatest things that schools have been successful with is increasing collective teacher efficacy. And really what that means is that the teachers believe that what they do can have an impact on student achievement. It can have an impact on how much our kids are learning. And our principals and our teachers have done such a great job, but with all the different initiatives that have taken place over the years, I do think there's been a little bit, some fractioning of collective efficacy especially at the building level. So much of it has come from the board to district administration, to building level administration, to our departments and into the classroom. Whereas if we could really build up, I think, the efficacy at the building level, with our principals, working with our teachers, I think there's some real opportunity there. And that's really what this is about. It's really empowering our building level people to do what it takes to impact our kids in a positive manner. So I could maybe change the wording on that a little bit to make it a little more understandable, but that's what that is.
Thank you. I'm glad I asked. I think that's a really great initiative. In terms of tweaking the wording, you use the term collective efficacy, which is not in here, and I wonder if that would be helpful to say, to maximize collective efficacy rather than staff efficacy, because the way I read it at first kind of sounded like individual staff members' efficacy, and that's not what you're talking about.
No, and I think I will work with the principals to see if maybe with the same meaning behind it, is there a way to make it more understandable? I will say that what Hattie's terminology says is collective teacher efficacy. And I think it's so important to include more than just our teachers. That's why I changed teacher to staff. But I did miss the collective piece, and I think that needs to be in there.
I don't need to micromanage your wording.
No, I appreciate it.
I think that's a fantastic idea, and it actually now sort of obviates the next question I was going to ask, but I'll just say it anyway, because another thing I didn't see in here under Pillar 3 was, going back to our strategic plan, under engaging our staff, We really talk about the action plan items about amplifying two-way communication and increasing staff collaboration, cultivating a supportive working environment. I actually think that effort could potentially really have a huge impact under that, under those goals under pillar 3. So makes a lot of sense.
Just to be clear, are you talking about the ones that are already there or adding something else?
Yeah, so sorry. Prior to hearing your answer to that, my question about that bullet point, I had thought that the goals that you have listed under pillar 3, like, didn't quite get at some of those things in our work plan, or in our strategic plan. But now hearing more detail about that collective efficacy piece, like, that seems like it really does get at the thing I thought was missing. Did I think that's more than the second time? Thank you. Other questions or discussion?
I was happy to see the attention to attendance, and Casey mentioned that earlier too. Continuing that goal to improve student attendance.
And this is, so you have mentioned, I see somebody caught on misspelling the building principles. You have mentioned that this would be something you would bring back to have kind of the board stamp of approval on. Do you have, like, is this something that if board members, are contemplating this over the coming weeks, that we could still submit input on, or, when it comes to like ideas in terms of tweaking some of these? Not making wholesale new items, but is that something that people could continue to reach out to you about over the next couple of weeks, or what's the timeline?
Absolutely. It would be nice to have this approved this summer. We're already working on these things, honestly, whether or not they're actually in the work plan. At the same time, it is nice to have that written direction, and there has to be some limitation as well. I think you all appreciate that. If it can get approved next time, that's fine. If it had to get pushed to the end of July, I don't think that's that big of a deal. Certainly, we would really like to have it done before our staff come back in August, if at all possible, because we do make a big deal out of this with our building principals. And then when they start their beginning of the year in-service training and everything. But people can reach out to me individually. I think, having those conversations sometimes is the best way to do it. But we also could have a group discussion, and if it's not ready for approval, we'll probably put it on the action agenda next time. But if it's not ready for approval based on discussion, it could always be bumped for another meeting.
That sounds great. And I meant to say at the beginning, we kind of dive right into getting into the details, but I also just wanted to note that when I read this, I really saw a lot of the things we've been talking about, the things Sam talked about earlier, the ACP, like the progress toward our goals for last year, the things that Casey was saying earlier, like really is just reflected in here. So I was impressed with how much it seemed to reflect what my understanding of the board member is. So we appreciate that.
And thank you. I agree. I think it's a good mix of stuff that has already been initiated but needs to be continued, and then also new initiatives. I think it's a good mix of that. And then I think the suggestions that I wrote down about the state budget work, supporting the communications plan, and then updating that collective advocacy, I think those are 3 really good suggestions. Thank you.
I also concur. I have a question. In pillar 3, I apologize if I missed it because I stepped out for a second, but the comprehensive superior PD needs assessment, I'm curious what that looks like, and like the 75% staff response rate. I'm curious about that too, because our collecting opinions rate tends to be quite lower. So I'm just curious what that kind of looks like.
Yep, and I can jump in with this one. Historically, the time that I've been in the district, and it predates me, on a 3-year cycle, we have a survey that goes out to our staff, and it asks them a series of questions related to their own individual needs, what they perceive as needs, And then, we use that to help build out our professional development plan over time. What I will say is we generally, fall somewhere between, 60 and 80% response rate because we, I think have shown time and time again that our PD that we then build out is based off of that information. And, we sometimes have to send out reminders, and we always send out, a few reminders with that. But identifying that response rate, and, that way we know we really are hearing from, a majority of our staff. One of the things that we tried really hard to do when we push that survey out, we then also take a look at our other data that's available to see, do we have an alignment between what our students' academic data is telling us and our behavioral data is telling us, and what our staff are also saying that they see as needs to determine, where some of those pieces fit. But then also, when we take a look at that piece, then we report out on, really, it's you said we did, so trying to clearly identify when staff and what staff groups have identified specific types of PD needs. So like Sammy's talking about onboarding for hourly and paraeducators and things like that. The last go around, that was the area that really popped on that needs assessment. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
And Brian, what's the typical response rate? It's not 75%. So, I missed that.
Generally, we're between like 60, to 80.
So you're looking to increase, yeah, I'm sorry.
I don't know if this is Brian or Joanna, whoever wants to. I am curious to know, so is this the same 3-year cycle we've been doing, or is it something new?
So it's the same cycle.
Is there anything changing about it? Because we didn't have very great results about exit surveys on PV and how it's going in the district. So I'm wondering if we're thinking about doing something different that we haven't done before so that we can plan differently.
So as far as doing the comprehensive needs, the PD needs assessment, that's a 3-year cycle. But then when we also do the staff engagement survey, that's one of the areas where we also draw that satisfaction with PD. So we couple those together, and that happens on a different cycle.
But to Michelle's point, and I understand what you're saying, Michelle, what are we gonna do different to be more effective with PD? Because this needs assessment hasn't served us as well as it could. I would say that one, increasing the response rate, that would be one thing, but perhaps we need to go back to the drawing board a little bit before the next meeting and see how else we can improve this to make it better.
I'm thinking maybe something a bit different, and I don't have a suggestion for you, so it's not like I know the answer. I just think there's got to be something we can do differently than we have in the past, and I'm concerned if we don't, if that was a big need that we heard from our staff.
I don't have it in front of me, but now that Michelle said this, I do remember that the PD satisfaction was one of the lowest scores we had on the staff survey last fall, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And one of the things that we did as follow-up with that was we hosted a series of building listening sessions specific on professional development. So, as we're talking, and I think Joe's point of, what are some things that we'll do differently, to come back and take a look at that, really digging into what some of that initial feedback was and looking at the types of questions that we asked on our needs assessment survey for staff to determine whether or not we're really getting to the heart of what it is that staff were saying they were looking for.
Would that potentially include, you talk about this, so this item says a comprehensive 3-year professional development needs assessment. And that typically that is mostly done through a survey, right? But would it make sense to also consider including things like maybe a focus group or listening sessions or things like that in addition to the survey?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. We'll rework it a little bit.
Which actually isn't necessarily like contrary to what's already written here.
Right.
I'll throw one more thought out. and I know everyone's trying, so that's not at all what I'm trying to do. I'm just wondering if something, I'm gonna throw this out there, so just it's on your radar, but if there's something completely different that's not about a survey with staff. Because a lot of times we're working so hard with educators that we don't know what's new and innovative out there, because if we did, we'd be doing it. So we don't know what to offer in a survey. Hey, I wanna do this, because we don't know what's there. I mean, we know some things, but what can we do to wow teachers and relight their fires however often for PDs when things they may not be expecting?
That's kind of connected to, I thought I had two, I think earlier in the HR report, I was noticing like our staff is really close to approaching like 50% is like 5 years and under, I think is what the number was, 40 something %. And so when we look at like things we've traditionally done, like Ed Camp, like what does that look like when half of your staff is very new and like, and then like you were saying, Michelle, in terms of, you know, are we leaning on the other less than half of staff that are veterans versus bringing people in? It's all things to consider, but I appreciate that that you've been having the conversation and that we're continuing.
I'm really reluctantly suggest an entirely new goal of mine. I've been trying to figure out how to phrase this in a way that's not too onerous, but I do think it's very important. This is either either pillar 1 or pillar 2. One of the kind of, in the general commentary, I kind of hear from people about like what they're concerned about in education. And in terms of preparing students and supporting students, like the big elephant in the room is obviously AI, and not only what effect it has on career paths, which we've talked about, because I have statistics in your report, which are great. But then also, how is it affecting the classroom learning in various forms, positive and negative? And I think the simplest thing to do might be at some point in the year to have some initial kind of baby report, whatever that means, and whatever you think is the most salient thing to say. And then each year we can look and say, okay, what are the questions we have, and keep going that way? Like don't make a 30-page report, but like, what are the kind of a brief spectrum of how different teachers may or may not be using tools. We've talked about this in various conversations. I think it's a big enough topic that warrants having a dedicated time at some point in the coming year, even if it's just an initial step.
Could I add to that? First of all, I think it's a great idea. The idea of starting with like a baby report with some really just initial information to build on, like that could even be in the beginning anecdotal. You know, I think it would be really helpful for us to hear things about like how is the social studies department using this, and what does one teacher have to say is still like useful at this stage in the game.
Yeah, I think we could build upon what we had last time, but then also maybe have some baseline indicators that we could continue to measure over time. Yeah, we can do that. Anybody else?
Excellent. Again, we will have this on the agenda for next time as an action item, but we could continue the discussion as necessary. Where are we? Discuss updates to voucher transparency advocacy. All right, so since our last meeting, we got some bad news from the city administrator after the city council had initially had a really positive reception to our presentation. They had heard from the county treasurer that the county was not willing to make changes to the tax statements. And that information came from the city administrator, but would potentially apply to all municipalities as a county issue. And since that time, Joe was able to be in contact with the county manager. Do you want to say anything more about what he said?
I think you pretty much nailed it, but there was a statewide clerks conference, and at that point, Department of Revenue advised the county clerks not to be messing with the tax bills. Part of it is every other number on the bill, my understanding is mandated by state law, and it's also, those numbers are also essentially certified through state processes. I kind of argued that technically the voucher dollars are as well, but it doesn't sound like there's much of an opportunity there. In the event that we wanted to continue down this road, more than likely it would require some sort of insert. I appreciate Dan Dunbar, he was really helpful giving information. An insert would probably be around $3,500 just for the city, and then the other municipalities would need to be added to that. I think some cities have paid for that. I don't think we probably could count on that here, based on city budgets right now, but that's kind of where things are at.
Based on that discussion, I had reached out to the Wisconsin Public Education Network, I wasn't able to have a conversation with those folks in time for this meeting. I do think that, it seems quite possible, likely even, that this information that came from the Department of Revenue was in response to this effort by the Wisconsin Public Education Network that's been going on statewide. I think that information might be new to those folks too, doing the organizing, and so I am interested to hear what they have to say about how we might change strategy at this point. As Joe mentioned, we could continue to pursue this, but we would be looking at, first of all, it would be a separate piece of paper and it would be cost of the district. Well, I'm curious to hear what other people think. My suggestion, I think, would be to put this on pause until we get more information from WePen about what their kind of responses to this, and what they think their next steps are. Which means we could, put it on a future agenda once I've heard more information from them. But I'm curious to hear what everyone thinks.
This is very disappointing because I feel like I've worked on this for 18 solid years and we're not getting anywhere. So it is very disappointing. But I really appreciate you, Rachel, because my next question was, and you answered it when I was to contact WPN to find out what they can do because they've worked with this before. And how can other cities do it and that we're not able to? Clare and Green Bay, it just doesn't make sense. So I do hope that you find some good information for next steps.
Yeah, and so there's, just for some clarification, some of these cities have approved it for next year's tax bills, and those cities are also now hearing from their county managers, staff, treasurers, but they are not willing to do it. And now this is relatively, to me, new information, that is also coming as a directive or advice from the Department of Revenue, which I think makes things a little more complicated. I think there are actually only one or two cities that did get them on the tax bills for last year, and the other places where municipalities had agreed to do it was for this year.
Thank you for the information. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought maybe, that other districts had a weigh in that we didn't, but if that's the case of the state, that's very unfortunate.
I do think we are taking the same path that most of those other districts have taken, so I'm not sure that there's like another door. But again, I think we've actually had a staff retreat today, so I wasn't able to get through to them before this meeting.
And obviously, depending on what WePen advises, that could influence the board. Otherwise, the next agenda item about the board ad hoc communications committee, maybe the focus needs to shift more towards that in terms of the voucher transparency.
Did you have something?
That's exactly what I was going to say. So network.
Great minds.
Yes,
I was gonna say we didn't have a topic for the first article.
I was also going to make that point, but I also was curious. So last I heard, we still had 2 township meetings. Have you canceled those, or what's the status?
I have not canceled those yet. That's a good question. We had talked, Abe and I had talked prior to this last piece of information about the Department of Revenue advice about continuing to have those conversations with the townships. I do think this changes things. And I'm not sure that it is a good use of our or their time to have those.
I think it'd also be an awkward conversation to talk about the topic of school taxes and then bring in the whole but the county and blah, 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 yeah. Make it urge to either, cancel or postpone those until we have clarification on what is even plausible.
Yeah, so what I could do, this week is reach back out to the town clerks that I had heard from, and maybe even the ones I hadn't, and give that piece of updated information, and maybe just say that we may come back to them when we have more.
Yeah, I don't think you have to like fill in all the historical details here.
Oh, sure, no,
Right,
yeah.
just, you know, just say we're gonna put this on hold for now, and we'll come back later.
Yes, sounds good.
Was that an absolute hard no, or was it a hard no on that change we were requesting, or was it a hard no that we can't change anything? Were you like, we could just retitle that line, so that Menomonie School District, you know, public and private schools, and, you know, something different.
The initial rejection that came from our Dunn County treasurer was a hard no on any language added to the tax statement. In terms of what the Department of Revenue has advised to counties throughout the state, I think that is also, I think that's consistent, right? I think it's no new language. But I don't know much about that. And I also don't know how official it is.
So that came from the County Clerks Association meeting, but
My understanding, and we're playing a game of telephone now, is that, yeah, the county clerks had a statewide conference and the Department of Revenue was there and commented. And I believe Green Bay was the poster child.
Yeah.
And I also want to point out, Mr. Drake and Mrs. Drow, you guys are welcome to head out whenever you want. Appreciate you staying so long. Thank you.
Any further questions or discussion on voucher transparency? I will continue to update folks as soon as I have anything else to say. All right, moving on. Dovetailing nicely, we have an update from our ad hoc committee for school advocacy communications.
Okay, so Jade, Michelle, and I met and looked through the document and couldn't find any way to pare it down. Because we just think it's very, it's all inclusive, all of it goes together. It was hard to find something that, you know, to pare down. So our solution to that was to split off the community listening addendum, because it is slightly different than the communication piece, to make our communication plan document a little bit shorter. Nothing has necessarily changed in it besides the split. So tonight we're just looking for feedback from the board. Do we want to keep the community listening sessions as a part of this, because it is a heavier lift and more commitment? I would be happy to organize and take on that part with some help, if that's something the board agrees is important. I personally think it is, because it goes along with, you know, everything we've been trying to do as a board over the last couple of years with transparency and communication and, you know, the community. So that's step one, we're looking for feedback from that. And then we have like immediate next steps, which I think we kind of solved tonight what our first article is gonna be about. An article for the next community newsletter or school crossings or something, setting the stage and launching our plan. And then also getting board input on finalizing a year-long editorial calendar. Yeah, so pretty much, I guess, start with those things as feedback for us. Your last feedback was to pare it down, which you didn't do. But we are really open to any suggestions and guidance.
I'd be happy to help with the community listening engagement sessions, so count me in for that. And I think exactly what you just said, Angela, and how we have been trying to develop that trust, transparency, and communication within the community is what we need to continue. And if that was evident on the school perception survey, it's a 19% increase of where the board is going. And we need to keep that momentum going forward. So count me in to help.
Thank you. I would be glad to help as well, and to me, it's imperative. If you remember, not all of you were on the board at the time, but remember we did those listening sessions before, you know, just kind of on the cuff, and we, you know, weren't really It was more about, why we couldn't pass a referendum kind of questions. But I had heard so many cool things from people about those discussions and about being able to have people in the public places and just talking about what was on their hearts and brain, whether we could solve the problem or not. It was just the idea that they were being able to be heard. And I just think it's very imperative. And to me, of course, I'm retired, so I have a little extra time on my hands sometimes, but, I'd be willing to help out and, be happy to work with that and be at some of those listening sessions if possible.
I just wanted to express support for you not paring down the plan. Because I think, it is an overwhelming document, but I also think that, I appreciate like thinking more about, what are our immediate next steps? Here is a sample calendar. Here's where we're dividing off on the community listening session. I think that having this complete plan, this 8 or 9 pages or whatever it is, as like our kind of guiding document, while we tackle consumable pieces of it, and keep on track with that. It makes a lot of sense to me. So in your, I guess, I'll let anyone else reflect if they have. Go ahead.
I think it's a great plan and document to have the guy be willing to help as needed.
Yeah, thank you for the support for the community listening sessions. As we all know, you can put as much information out there as possible, and getting people to read is sometimes hard. So I think it's, talking to people face to face and being out and showing how much we care about these things will really get more conversation going and more interest in it. So thank you.
If I could offer a suggestion, Jenny has been working a lot this summer already on her back to school newsletter. And by the end of July, it goes to the printer. I think that's a terrific opportunity for the board to set the stage and possibly even include a schedule of listening sessions. But we would need to know sooner than later, especially how much space would be needed, because what is it, 4 pages? It's kind of like if we add 1 page, we almost need to add 4. So, which we can do because there's always more we can add. But if that's going to happen, then we are going to have to create more content, or we can shift things around in a smaller part. So I don't need to know the answer to that tonight, but probably in the next couple of weeks.
Remind me, Joe, I need this a separate set of notes. What's like an ideal deadline for getting content to the newsletter?
The end of July.
End of July.
All right, but a plan, heads up on what we're planning on doing for space before the
Yes.
next couple weeks are cool. And what we had discussed, we met with Joe a couple of weeks ago, we discussed this potentially for that first newsletter. I know we were talking about poetry, but I think what we were discussing was more, let's use that as sort of setting the stage for future communications. I love the idea if we can land on some session dates for that, that'd be awesome.
If I may disagree with what several people said, I actually think that a voucher communications piece would maybe be more powerful, closer to tax statement time.
Yeah, and I think we build that, so that was, so developing an article for the newsletter, some content for the newsletter, and then we have a sample editorial plan, making that more than sample with real dates, real topics, that we've all sort of approved and building that in on that timing, I think it would be a great next step too.
Yeah, I think when we get into the details of the editorial plan, pairing that with some of our upcoming agenda items, like the calendar of board reports, pairing it with our annual work plan, right? Some of those things would make a lot of sense. Think about.
Sure.
So we have, as next steps, kind of launching that plan for community listening sessions. And the current ad hoc committee has some volunteers for people who would join in planning the listening session. So that's great. Writing that very first article, finalizing a year-long editorial calendar. Does the committee feel confident in those steps, or is this getting to be more work than you thought you signed up for?
Not quite yet.
Glad to hear that.
Jojo. No, that's all what we had talked about. Last week, I think we already have unofficial assignments for that we can formalize real quick. So that won't be a problem.
So our next board meeting is July 13th. Do you think by that point it might be possible to have, kind of a sample article and maybe on the 13th, identify a schedule of fall listings? You won't need them for the whole year even, but maybe just some fall listening sessions that could be included in that newsletter. And maybe the board could review it on the 13th, and then from there, Jenny could add it to the newsletter.
Yeah, I think for sure myself, Amy, and Emily can get dates together by then. So I'll take ownership of that part of it.
Yeah, and I could draft up an article certainly, supplement that.
I can help on that too, Angie, if you want another person. I definitely will have the listening sessions. I think that I didn't say so, but I think probably all of us would be happy to help with the actual listening sessions. But we've got another number of people to help plan it. Perfect. Which I'm not signing for. But I'll be there. This feels like a really good starting place. And again, I appreciate your willingness to, hopefully you and everyone else who volunteered, willingness to do this. And we'll keep checking in about kind of workload on that. Any other discussion on the topic of the Committee for Scholastic Communication? Just good work, thanks. Yes. All right. Then let's move on to our next agenda item, review revisions to policy 171.2, agenda preparation and dissemination. So we've got a sample here, and hopefully this is clear to folks. Like, the idea with all those X's is that Joe has written up some sample language, and we could talk about what that time frame might look like and what would go in there. Do you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. I think I tried to take the discussion from the last board meeting and the discussion the board had. And basically what it is saying that we're going to try to put non-sensitive background out there before the meeting so that the public that come to the meeting could follow along. I don't know if the board wanted to put a specific, 2 hours or 1 hour or by noon, or maybe the X's aren't needed at all, just saying we're going to get it out there before the meeting starts essentially. It's just the board directing me and Jenny what to do.
So remembering back to our last meeting, we kind of ended, I think, if I may summarize whatever I think we were at, is the board was pretty generally supportive of having public access available to most of our kind of board docs, background docs that don't have sensitive information prior to those meetings. And we talked about a number of different timelines. And I guess with those X's here, and the drafting of this policy change, right? I think there's an opportunity right now, if anyone has strong feelings or thoughts on, what would be an appropriate sort of window to put in there, a timeline, or to not have one at all, but simply to have them directed to be available before the meeting. Are there thoughts on that?
My gut is to not have a specific time in order to give our admin flexibility. If we had a larger amount of people in the admin building, and it's but there's always so much going on in preparation for these meetings. I think it might be best to offer flexibility.
I know Jenny and I would really appreciate that. I can tell you that my intent would be to try to do it before lunch, the day of the meeting. Because we're not going to want to be doing this at 5:15. At the same time, there are meetings when it comes down to 5:15 and a report has changed or a hiring, there are times when that would be necessary. So I think that flexibility would be helpful.
And I think it's maybe worth stating that, like, for me, I guess, if there was a report loaded up that had a corrected, a correction to it, or there was a small change, like, I would not think that this policy would require you to have that, like, last minute change in there. I guess that would be my understanding of the intent. Like, the intent would be to have, like, a version available, and if there was a change or a last minute version or a document even came in at the last minute that you didn't have, like, I don't necessarily think that would be a violation of the policy change in my mind. I don't know if other people feel the same way.
No, I'm Dominic. I don't feel like there needs to be if we were talking about, we're gonna do it a half an hour before the meeting, I think if that was the intent, I'd wanna push on having that be sooner. But hearing from you guys that that's, your intent is much sooner than that, I don't feel like there's a need to hardwire that into a policy. At this point, we can always go back and adjust it if it's not satisfactory, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that this is something we could revisit in a few months if there's, if we're encountering some kind of friction with it, or if it's creating a hassle, it's something we could always, revisit.
I agree. I'm feeling like more, if we can have, an intent to do it and do our best to do it, get it done so that people can follow along when they need to, that is important. On the flip side, I think also we have to be thinking about the board having documents in a timely, in enough time that we are seeing things before the community is seeing them. So it's just like a balancing act. But I think that if we write the policy flexibly, then it's not going to be a huge impact when future board people come on, because they, these positions move, and unless it's changed later, I think the more flexibility we can have in there, the better.
So as the draft is written now, you could simply remove those placeholder X's, and it reads logically. Okay. So we would bring this back to the next meeting for a official vote. Go ahead.
My concern is, I don't want to make a whole lot of work on administration. I think it's important to get it out there, and I like the flexibility. But I guess my question is to administration and to Jenny especially, if you have to put everything out already on like Wednesday or Thursday, I guess we get our packets usually on Thursday from board docs, then you have to turn around and move those things into the public content. Is that going to be a hardship on administration?
I'll take the answer to that. It is extra work, but we do the extra work right now because we wait till the meeting's over and then we move non-sensitive items. It is extra work, but Amy, I think it's worth it because I think the board should retain the board's privilege to have an opportunity to review the information before the public. And if we do it all at once on Thursday, the board would lose that privilege. So I think the way it's written and what we discussed tonight is very doable.
I don't want you to suggesting that, that you do that, but I just wanted to get a feel for that. And if you think it's okay, then great, wonderful.
One last time you on Tuesday after having begun. Okay. Any final questions or discussion on that policy change? So we'll vote on that at our next meeting. Next up, we have the calendar of board reports. This is something that this is only for review, but correct, we are not going to be voting on this. This is just a general calendar of when we see various things throughout the year. I had one question about this, and it came to my mind when we were talking about the new website. Is this something, or is there a version of this that could be one of those like easy to access links on the website at some point? And maybe not in that, like, I somehow doubt it would be the most popular. So maybe not under that most popular, but somewhere else, so that if a person really wanted to know, hey, like, when do they talk about accountability report cards? Here's the easy clip to say, oh, that's November.
It could be done. I'm a little hesitant just because I know how much it changes each year. Like some things, like setting the tax levy, that doesn't change. But there are a lot of things in here that move sometimes 6 weeks, especially with some of the reports. Part of it's for the convenience of the board and scheduling the meetings. Part of it's the ability of the team to get the data they need and the time to create the report. So this is such a rough document, I'd be a little cautious sharing it in that type of manner. If we wanted to create a different document that's more locked in with less information, that maybe that's something we could do in the future, but not with this one.
Yeah, I mean, like if there was sort of a less specific version, right? November includes state accountability report cards, as an example. Because there's quite a bit of like specifics, even though we all kind of know that they move around.
But sometimes that goes to December.
Yeah,
So, I know what you're saying.
Right. Any other questions or discussion on the calendar board reports? All right, easy peasy. Then we have review extracurricular staff contract requests, another informational report. Any questions or discussion on extracurricular staff contract requests?
I would like just to point out, and I know we're getting long here, I really, really appreciate some of our staff members being willing to help out in short-term situations, and especially when we look at girls swimming. Our coach had resigned, she's moving out of the area, and our boys swimming coach is going to team up and do a co-coaching with our assistant girls coach. That's a great solution. Also, Lexi Hastings did a wonderful job as our girls tennis coach. That starts like in 5 weeks, and she had a great opportunity at UW Eau Claire, so we totally appreciate it and we're happy for her. But that put a huge dent into our coaching staff, and Bryce Suprai, our boys coach, who also coaches boys basketball, is willing to step up. Without these people stepping up, it's getting harder and harder to find good coaches. We would be really in a tough situation, so thank you so much to these people.
Thank you for pointing that out. Any questions or discussion on the extracurricular staff contract request? All right, so, I'm sorry, items related to next meeting dates, board committees and reports. I just lost board docs, I'm sorry. Did you have something you wanted to bring up?
A couple things,
Okay.
and Katie might have to jump in too. But with our school district photos, in my 12 years, I don't think we've really like scheduled a board photo session. We have had board members sometimes get their photo taken. That and the staff here at ASC, we would like to schedule a time because it's included with our regular school pictures agreement. It's not going to be an extra charge. We would like to schedule a time to have school board members to be able to stop in and have their picture taken at ASC. I know everyone's really busy, and we're thinking maybe before a board meeting, but maybe in Katie time period, like over the next 6 weeks maybe, or is it a month?
I think 6 weeks max, for going out. They want us to schedule before they obviously start taking all the back to school pictures, that they contracted several districts for. So I would say early August at the latest.
So our next 3 board meetings, if one of those 3 would work, it's too bad we didn't have it tonight because everyone's here. And I know everyone has some traveling and things like that going on, but Jenny or I will work with the board to try to confirm a date in one of those next 3 board meeting nights to try to coincide that.
Can anybody say right now if they're going to miss any of the coming board meetings? What one? July 8th? Sorry, 13th.
July 13th?
July 13th.
I would talk to,
Yeah.
a conflict in that.
So I think we'll have to look at August.
So August would be better for me, but.
Does anybody else have an issue with August 10th? So August 10th, and thanks for doing that right now, let's see, it's, all right, so we'll book it for August 10th and probably a little early, so we get those done before the meeting.
Like 5:15 or something, or.
we'll double check with the company, but yeah, maybe 5 or 5:15, something like that.
Excellent. All right, we have a closed sessions.
I have one thing. It's fine. Yeah, so I'm the representative on the Joint Review Board, and the Joint Review Board has a meeting on Wednesday, July 22nd at 11 a.m. I won't be able to make that meeting, so I let the Joint Review Board know that I either won't be there or we can send an alternate. So if anyone happens to be available on Wednesday, July 22nd at 11 a.m., usually these meetings are pretty short. I'm guessing roughly half an hour, maybe 40 minutes max.
Where are they?
They're at City Hall, right over there. So yeah, they're at City Hall, in the City Council chambers.
Downtown, City Hall.
Yeah, City Hall, yeah.
Okay,
Right,
well, because I know there's a Dunn County.
no, it's right here at City Hall, off of 9th and it's the annual meeting, so basically reviewing the TIDs that have been approved or changed in the last year. There won't be anything dramatic, but if anyone's curious about reviewing, the building and city development plans, it's interesting to be there, so.
Let me check my calendar, I'll get back to you.
Rachel, I also, on the 14th of July, the Nap Village Board meets, and I've been put on the agenda to talk about the Pleasantdale School, which is a one-room schoolhouse that sits next to the Nap Building. And what's gonna happen to that school? And if anybody would like to join me at that meeting, that would be great. Or if you have any input, ideas of things that I should share or not share, I think personally, the building needs a lot of work. It's a great one-room schoolhouse. I've gone through it, and it's really impressive, but it needs some roof and a bunch of other work, and I don't know, in our budget, if we can afford to take care of a historical monument like that, maybe that's not in our students' best interest. So that's why I asked Joe if it would be appropriate to talk to the Naps Village about maybe them taking over this historic site. And I have done a little bit of research to see what kind of help they could receive, grants and so on historical buildings. So I'm going to share that with them. So if anybody thinks that we shouldn't be getting rid of it and we should spend several $1,000s on fixing it, well, I guess we need to know that too. And we have one more school board meeting before the 14th, so bring your ideas.
Yeah, so if anybody wants it on the agenda, you can let me or Rachel know, but this is something that Eric and I have been working with, and appreciate Dale's involvement, because it was donated to the district, with the donation, this is years and years ago, with the donation, it was supposed to be upkept. I understand why it hasn't been upkept recently, so there's a whole mechanism in place where the district would offer it back. But I think Dale's idea of working with the village is a good one. But if anybody has any questions, we can report more on the next meeting.
Thank you for bringing it up, and thank you for taking that on. So we have a closed session tonight, so I would like to propose we take a 5-minute recess and return to the closed session. Thank you.